Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We're in a phase where we're actually comparing the United States with the UK, and it's a very interesting phase. So, for today's comparison video, it is from a channel known as The Lost in the Pond. And the title of the video is 10 Ways Brits and Americans Use Numbers Very Differently. I really don't see how that is even possible, but according to this guy, there's 10 different ways. So we're going to get right into this video, but I just want to say, please do like and subscribe. And if you have any suggestions, click that link in the pinned comment section. You can recommend videos I check out as soon as possible. And also a link for the original video will be in the description of my videos. Go ahead and check them out. Without further ado, guys, let's get right into this video.
Oh, hello, don't mind me, just using the calculator on my phone, which I keep in my pocket just to stick it to my Year 10 maths teacher who told me that I'd never have such luxury. And speaking of maths, remember a few videos ago when I said this? A question that I get all the time is, why do British people say maths instead of math? Well, when it comes to Britain and America, this is by no means the only difference. And speaking of maths, remember a few videos ago when I said this? A question that I get all the time is, why do British people say maths instead of math? Well, when it comes to Britain and America, this is by no means the only difference that involves numbers. In fact, since I moved to the United States, my daily life has become filled with numeric anomalies with which my brain may never come to terms. Now, before I get into that, I do want to point out that this video will not be examining our two countries' different measuring systems, because I also did that in a previous video. And while we're on the subject of numbers, if you want to propel this channel to 1 million subscribers, and you haven't yet become one yourself, do that now! In the meantime, here are 10, yes, 10 ways that British and American people use numbers very differently. Now, before I hit record on today's video, I did a little bit of a tally as to how many places I've lived in either country. During the 26 years that I lived in Britain, I lived at precisely 5 addresses, compared to 9 during the 16 years that I've lived in America. And during that time, one major pattern has stood out to me. American addresses definitely have longer house numbers, but British addresses have longer postcodes. So it all evens out. In fact, let me give you some examples of what I mean. From memory, every single address that I had in Britain comprised of 2 digits. And pound for pound, the experience of most British people is that their house address won't ever exceed 3 digits. There are occasional exceptions to that, but in America those exceptions seem to in fact be the rule. Because at virtually all of the places that I've lived in the US, the house or the apartment number has been in the thousands. And also at some of these addresses, the American street name itself might contain a number, like 321st Avenue. They don't usually go that high. But 2nd Street. In Britain, a street that's also a number is very uncommon, to the extent that I'm not sure they even exist. However, as I said, Britain has America beat when it comes to the size of our postcodes. And if for whatever reason you're confused by the term postcode, it is simply what Americans know as a zip code. You see, in Britain, a postcode can range from 6 to 8 characters, where in the US it's just 5. However, notice there that I said characters and not numbers. Well, since this video is all about numbers, there is something to keep in mind here. British postcodes are a combination of letters and numbers, meaning that American zip codes probably have more numbers, but that's whatever. The first letters in each...
That's interesting. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. They called it postcode. Like, I'm not sure, but even here in Finland, I'm so sure I've seen zip code, not postal codes. Whatever.
UK postcode denote the postal region. So for example, where I grew up in Grimsby, that was part of the Doncaster postal code for some reason. So the first 2 letters are DN. And then you have a series of numbers and letters that denote a more precise location. And that's it. In America, it's just numbers, so that's easy. And basically, the first couple of digits are arranged by state. So here in the state of Illinois, those first 2 digits range from 60 to 62. Of course, when it comes to the size of your house number, there's one group of people who don't give a flying herd of badgers, and that's data brokers. Instead, they're so preoccupied with making bank from selling your address to people search sites. After buying my first American house, I started showing up on hundreds of them. How do I know? Because each instance was identified by today's sponsor, Inc. And it works too. In fact, who knows, maybe we'll help you. The link is in my description below. One other series of digits over which Britain has America beat is phone numbers, actually. Typically speaking, if we're not calling from overseas...
Yeah, I think probably the entire Europe has this one, where the phone number has like this extra number in front of it. Like what is my phone number? I don't even know my damn phone number. But I think like probably my phone number. Yeah, this shit is weird. I was gonna say it has a 40 in front of it. My phone number is just weird. Like it's complicated. Like European phone numbers are very different from American phone numbers for a fact. You got I don't know what are the things on the European phone numbers, what they're called, but with the American you have the area code and the phone number. So that's it.
In which we would need to use a country code, then a UK phone number usually consists of 11 digits. US phone numbers, meanwhile, consist of 10, basically 2 zip codes put together. The major difference here comes in the area code. For the first 20 years of my life, growing up in Grimsby, my area code was 01472, 5 digits. But it's worth keeping in mind that that only applies to landline phones. In the last 25 years, of course, we've seen the rise of the mobile phone and/or calculator. In Britain, unlike with landline phones, these are not assigned an area code. In fact, I think most, if not all, mobile phones in the UK begin with the digits 07. Incidentally, those are 2 digits that are going to be very important later on in this video, so keep watching. In America, I was surprised to find that this was quite different, because your mobile, or cell phone as it's usually known in the US, will usually carry the same area code as your landline phone, if you still have a landline phone. So for example, the first place that I lived was Anderson, Indiana, and that city is in a region of Indiana that carries the area code 765. So all of the landlines there begin 765, and if you purchase your cell phone there, most likely that too will have the same area code. And most states, like Indiana and my current state of Illinois, are home to multiple area codes, which is why it was surprising to discover there are in fact 12 states, including the behemoth that is Alaska, that have just one. And that's because said states have more cows than people, probably. Earlier on, when I said this, just to stick it to my Year 10 maths teacher who told me that I'd never have such luxury. It did occur to me that my thousands of American viewers might have been thinking, what's Year 10? Was Lawrence born in the 1st century? No. A year in this instance is the equivalent of what Americans would call a grade at school. And it just happens that this particular example is a year populated by 14 to 15-year-olds. And you might be thinking, ooh, Lawrence, that's not 10, that's grade 9. Well, actually, it's both, you see, from between the ages of 5 to 6, British children begin what is known as Year 1. But as I discovered while watching the documentary The Kindergarten Cop, Americans don't call that the 1st grade, they call it kindergarten. And so then, but as I discovered, and speaking of years, that brings us on to this. I think at this point, most Americans don't call that the 1st.
Yeah, hold on. You got year 13 and shit. Okay, so it's not very different, but saying year 1, year 2, year 3 is very different. Like, you usually just say 5th grade, 4th grade, 6th grade, 10th grade. I get that, but crazy.
Grade, they call it kindergarten, and so their numbering system is always one behind us. Oh, and speaking of years, that brings us on to this.
Oh, I forgot.
I think at this point, most of us are probably aware that Britain and America can't agree on how to write the date. Obviously, in Britain, it's day 1st, month 2nd, and year last. As evidenced by our famous Guy Fawkes slogan, remember, remember, the 5th of November. Whereas in America, of course, it's flipped, as evidenced by July the 4th. Americans usually say the 4th of July. I don't know why they do that.
Yeah, I remember when this one messed me up. I was like, oh yeah, but we always say month first, like 9/11 or something like that. And then I was like, even Independence, 4th of wait. Oh shit, damn! The day came before the month right there. And I was really actually shocked. But yeah, this is something that I just can't talk about it. Like, this is one thing, I just can't talk about it. I don't have enough knowledge on it. Like, there are some times where you'll say the day before the month, but for most instances, it's going to be the month before the day.
For everything else, it's the month 1st and the day 2nd. Why do they do that? Well, you'll just have to watch my YouTube short all about it. One of my longtime patrons, Jeff, asked me on this week's secret live stream, in the US, most people have memorized their phone numbers and social security numbers. What personal numbers are people expected to know in Britain? And phone numbers used to be one of those until we didn't need to anymore. But our equivalent of America's social security number is our national insurance number, or as it's known intimately to me, NIN. Nobody calls it that really. So, what are the major
Okay. Finland actually has social security. which is interesting. But yeah, I've always said, listen, I'll say it a million times. Finland feels like a mini America to me. It just seems and feels like that to me. I don't know. Whatever.
Numerical differences between an SSN and a NIN. Well, for once, it isn't the number of characters, because an SSN has 9 and a NIN has 9. Try saying that after 7 white Russians. But the difference here is similar to zip codes versus postcodes. A NIN is comprised of 2 letters, followed by 6 numbers, and another letter for good measure. In the US, it's all numbers. America doesn't like letters. The first set of 3 digits is the area number, the second set of 2 digits is the group number, and then the final set of 4 digits is the serial number. We all care about that, obviously. The point is, I have both a NIN and an SSN, so I'm special.
Mitä unelmien tavoittelu vaatii, kun muut epäilee sua?
Time. Is it real? Oh, that's a different video. Well, sometimes, to people like me who've lived on 3 different time zones, time can feel like it's ahead of its time. So I don't want to get bogged down in that, because there are other differences to talk about, namely how we tell the time. For instance, in Britain, if the time is 9:15, we might well say it's 9:15. In America, you often hear a 9:15, and similarly, Brits might refer to 9:30 as 9:30, whereas Americans might say 9:30. But the biggest difference between British and American digital clocks can be seen once we get to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. At that point, in America, clocks will simply say 1 o'clock. But not in Britain, where it suddenly goes from 12:59 to 13 o'clock. And that's because British clocks are on military time. And when I lived in Britain, I never knew this as military time. In fact, it was Americans that alerted me to this term.
Really?
I just thought of it as time, like...
Oh shit! Oh shit! That's actually crazy. What's ironic is I took my time and I'm getting better at it. Back in the day, I couldn't just look at the time and be like, okay, that's that. I'd be like, yeah, okay. I had to count them up, but now I'm actually getting better at it, where I can actually look at it. I'll never say 19 o'clock. Never. I'll say 7 o'clock. That's just simple as that. I'm never gonna say that. But I do adjust to it. Understanding to it a little bit, but it just sounds weird. 13 o'clock, 1 o'clock, like it's different, bro. It's really different.
The whole world does this. And now that I know that it is military time, I'm confused that America doesn't do it, because they have the biggest military in the world. And then I found that the US military does do it, but the general public doesn't. Either way, to this very day, I instinctively know that 7 p.m. in the evening, that last word was redundant, is equal to 19 o'clock. I should point out that British people don't go around saying 19 o'clock. In conversation, we would say 7, which makes it even weirder, I suppose, that our clocks don't do that.
Really?
But anyway, a moment ago when I was talking about quarters, there was one thing that I forgot to mention, because it wasn't quite relevant yet, and that's how the two countries refer to a quarter, as in the fraction. Because I've noticed that Americans, like my wife for example, use the words quarter and 1/4 interchangeably. But having grown up in Britain, 1/4 always sounds weird to me, because then we would only say quarter in that context. But I'm afraid that I'm going to have to interrupt myself there with a couple of caveats. The first of those is we don't have special words for other fractions, except for half. But then again, if you were to say 1/2, you could get confused with the time. And the other thing that might explain why Americans often plump for 1/4 is that a quarter is already part of the national dialogue, because that's the name of an American coin of the same name. Did you edit this? And I want to finish this video by talking about 3 numbers in particular, the first of which is 0. Is 0 a number? I'm no mathematician. And 0 is an interesting one to me because both countries have synonyms of the word 0 that the other country doesn't have. In America, somebody might say, I got zilch, as in, I've got nothing. Whereas Britain's alternatives for this nice round number are often context dependent. Firstly, you've got nil, which you often find in sports, as in, Grimsby Town Football Club won the FA Cup final 6.
Yeah, I've heard about this before. I've actually heard about this, like, with soccer fans and football fans, whatever you want. You know what, football fans. Yeah, I've heard it, and I'm like, yeah, that's actually crazy.
Nil, whereas American commentators are more likely to say 6-0 or 6-zilch. And then there's the word naught, which from memory is what I called 0 when I was a little kid. But it's also used in the title of a game that Americans call tic-tac-toe, a game that we call noughts and crosses. And remember earlier when I said this? My area code was 01472. This use of O to denote 0 in phone numbers is not something you often hear in America, where the preferred option would be 01472. And then there were 7, or 2 actually, but 7 is one of them. Here in the United States, the number 7 is almost always written with 1 horizontal stroke and 1 diagonal stroke. But as many observant Americans have often pointed out to me, this is not always the case in Britain, where to that we like to add another horizontal stroke through the middle. And you might be thinking, why do you do that? And the answer is simple: to avoid confusion with the number 1. And to all of the Americans laughing at this idea, 7-Eleven agrees with me. I've just realised that's probably not an argument in my favour. And finally, how do you define 1 billion? Well, most people today who have a grasp of big numbers would tell you 1,000 million, but try telling that to British people from before the 70s. And that's because before 1974, British people, as well as a host of other countries, defined a billion as 1 million million, otherwise known as a long billion, or more commonly, a trillion. And you might be thinking, what did those British people call 1,000 million? And the answer is simple: 1,000 million. However, all of this ceased to be the case when we followed the American example. A decision that was taken by 69th UK Prime Minister Harold Wilson, not to be confused with 67th UK Prime Minister Harold Wilson. That said, most European countries actually still operate under the long billion, which makes you wonder, is Luxembourg the richest country just because it keeps adding on 3 zeros? I've no idea.
What?
Well, if I've learned anything today, it's that both countries have a very different set of numbers and occasionally letters. And for somebody who's already not very good at maths, this video has really made me miss my word videos. Anyway, thank you to my ponderers with whom I...
Yeah, I mean, I think this video was pretty accurate. I heard him say something that I don't think I agreed with. When he was referencing about 0 not being in the US, it's not common to use O to represent this. It's not common to use O instead of 0. I don't know of that. Even to say your GPA is like 2.0, it's not 3.0. It's like 2.0. Like there's so many. Like I don't know. Maybe it's people I'm around a little bit different, but yeah, the O is definitely used to represent 0 a lot of the times. Yeah, I even just came to my 5.0. Yeah. I don't know. Anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. I appreciate it. Like and subscribe, and until next time, I'm out of here. Peace.